after. Okay. First item on agenda. Apologies for absence. It's what's in here. It is.
Councillor Nicomasi.
Just the one. Thank you. That's over now then. Item 2. Any disclosures of personal or prejudicial interests? Councillor Jones.
Yeah, agenda item 6. I'm chair of governors in Oxford School. I've already done the form.
Okay, no others? We start Chris has in there.
Yes, one small update for you. Yesterday, the new version of TAN 15 came into effect. So TAN 15 is the TAN that deals with development, flooding and coastal erosion. Not yet. I've only gone through quite very quickly. The reason I'm mentioning it today is because the first application on the agenda has a section in it which discusses flood risk. The advice we've had from Welsh Government regarding the new TAN is that the new TAN should only be taken into account for all planning applications received from yesterday onwards. So in terms of the applications on this agenda, they have got to be assessed against the old version of TAN 15. So there are no updates which need to be made to the report. So everything within Eileen's report, which we'll go through now, is correct and still stands. So just for clarification, Chair.
You had good applications last Friday?
We haven't. It was all kept a bit quiet actually. So it was we kind of knew behind the scenes, but yeah, no flurry of applications last week.
Well, thank you, Chris. Okay, the item 3 is to approve and sign the minutes of the previous meeting. You find that starting on page 1, 2, page 3, and page 4. If somebody to move as a true record, please. Thank you. Thank you very much. Item 4. Any items for deferral or withdrawal? Any? No, not any. Okay. Item 5 then is the determination of planning applications under the Town and Country Planning Act. And the item we have before us is item 1, and it's over to Dyffryn Close. Thanks, Aileen.
Thank you, Chair. Pranam, good afternoon. Okay, this application is seeking full planning consent for the demolition of the existing transfer station building and a proposed detached replacement building to house depollution and tyre machines located at Abertawe Metals off Dyffryn Close in the Swansea Enterprise Park. The application is reported to Planning Committee for decision because it relates to waste development. So this slide shows the general location of the site in the context of the surrounding area and wider setting. It is generally located in the northern part of the city, near the River Tower and the A48. Next slide, please. So this is the counterpart aerial image showing the location of the site and its surroundings. The general vicinity is largely industrial in context, with other commercial and retail uses nearby. To the immediate north of the site benefits from planning permission granted by Planning Committee in 2023 for a mixed-use commercial development. Next slide, please. So here's a more detailed site location plan together with the existing block plan. The site is access of St David's Road via Dyffryn Close and accommodates a range of buildings of various ages and designs together with hard standing areas. Next slide, please. Here's the proposed site block plan. The proposal will involve demolition of a large building within the site. This building has been outlined in red dash on the plan. It will be left as an open area of hard standing, but adjacent to the existing building will contain small bay areas for stored sorted waste materials, and the southern part of the site would contain new parking spaces. The application also proposes to construct a much smaller building, which is indicated in grey on the plan, located in the southeastern corner of the site. Next slide, please. So this is the plan of the building that is to be demolished. It measures approximately 15 metres wide, 60 metres deep, and 16 metres in height. The existing building has a pitched roof and is made out of brick on the lower half and corrugated sheeting in its upper half, and it contains asbestos. Next slide, please. So this is the proposed new building. It's much smaller than the one to be demolished and would approximately measure 7 metres wide, 13 metres deep and 6.6 metres in height. It would be faced in metal cladding. It would contain the depolluting and tyre machinery which are used as part of the waste operations at the site. Next slide, please. As mentioned earlier, within the hard standing, it's proposed to create concrete bays for the sorted waste materials. These have been illustrated on this plan, and also a small section of the wall of the demolished building at the southern end of the site will be retained to provide a boundary between the site and the new car parking spaces. Next slide, please. So turning to the photographs, this slide shows the site from Dyffryn Close, with the approximate direction shown on the arrow on the site plan. The elongated, tall, bulky building is what is being demolished. The new building would sit to the left of the small brick building behind the grey palisades type fencing. Next slide, please. As you approach the end of Dyffryn Close, this photograph looks towards the site entrance. The site is on the right-hand side, and to the left is a bus maintenance depot. Next slide, please. These two photographs are taken from one of the site entrances. It's a working yard, and the proposal would change this to a more open area following the demolition of the large building, which is on the left-hand side of the photo. The new smaller building will be constructed round about where the black van is located. Next slide, please. This photo shows the other entrance into the site, which is behind the large building to be demolished. This entrance takes you to the rear yard of the site. Next slide, please. This photograph is taken from further distance off Clace Road, which is the A48. It looks across the site that I mentioned earlier that has planning permission for mixed-use commercial development. The larger photo is a zoomed-in version where you can see more of the existing site, particularly the large building that is to be demolished. Next slide, please. This slide shows the wider context of the enterprise park with the approximate location of the site outlined in red. It shows that there is no coherent pattern to development in the area, and there is a mixture of buildings and large areas of open-air storage present. Next slide, please. So the main issues to consider in the determination of this application relate to the principle of the development and impacts upon visual amenity, residential amenity, highway safety, flood risk, ecology and the environment. No public representations have been received during the publicity of this application. With regards to the principle of the development, the report explains that the site already operates as a waste transfer facility following approval in 2010. It is within the Swansea Enterprise Park and in an area that generally accommodates heavier commercial and industrial uses, such as those that are potential noise and disturbance, such as vehicle repairs, depots and plant hire uses. The report notes that the site where the new building is proposed is not within the red line boundary of the approved site for the waste transfer facility, so the application before you is effectively to extend an area that could be used for this purpose. In this respect, the report assesses the proposal in context of various policies, particularly policy RP8 of the LDP, which specifically deals with waste management facilities, and Welsh Government TAN 21, which relates to waste. The report explains that the application has been accompanied by a waste policy statement required by TAN 21. The statement explains that the proposed site will sort inert material from domestic properties and construction sites. No hazardous materials will be taken and only clean material will be sorted on the site. Scrap cars are also brought to the site for depollution. The statement explains that no new operations are proposed as part of this application and all processes are covered by the existing licence for the site issued by Natural Resources Wales. So having regard to a range of factors, including the planning history and the context of the site, the report concludes that the principle of extending the curtilage to a waste transfer is acceptable. In visual terms, the application site is visible from public views such as the cycle track to the west adjacent to the river, and also from Dyffryn Close and longer distances such as the A48 Clace Road. The surrounding roads are characterised by industrial and commercial buildings of similar scale and design to those on the application site. Outside storage of vehicles and materials is also a common characteristic of the locality, which reinforces the heavy commercial nature of the area. The demolition of the existing building and its replacement with a far smaller building is also considered acceptable in this context. Areas of outside storage, together with minor additions of sorting bays and parking areas, are also considered visually compatible. Access to the site is of differing close and would not be affected by the proposed development. The provision of the new building will remove some parking provision, but replacement parking is being proposed, and the local highway authority raised no objections, subject to the submission of a construction method statement. The site is within Zone C1 flood risk area, and the report considers that the development is justified in this location, and NRW, who are the technical advisors on council matters, has raised no objections to the proposal. Given the scale and nature of the proposal, it is possible that the development may fall below the need for separate SAB approval to deal with surface water drainage. In particular, it is also noted that large parts of the development would utilise existing hard standing areas. No new foul drainage will be required, as washing and toilet facilities within existing retained buildings will be utilised. Separately, the block plan indicates a new petrol and oil interceptor, which will be installed to collect discharges from depollution activities taking place on the site. It is understood that this will be discharged to a sealed unit that would be emptied by a licensed waste management company. Welsh Water have raised no objections to the proposal, and whilst a water main crosses the site, this is not in the immediate area being developed, and conditions relating to all drainage matters have been recommended. The site is largely used as a waste transfer site and benefits from separate licensing permit from NRW. Notwithstanding this, NRW and Pollution Control Department of the Council have examined the proposal and raised no objections subject to conditions to deal with the raft of land contamination. The nearest residential properties are about 135 metres to the west of the site on Tower Street, which is on the opposite side of the River Tower. The River Tower is also designated quiet area. The report acknowledges that the current use of the site, and whilst the demolition of the existing building will create more open surface space, this is unlikely to result in any significant additional impacts upon neighbouring properties, particularly in terms of noise and disturbance over and above the existing situation at the site. The Pollution Control Department of the Council has raised no objections and no public representations have been received. Notwithstanding this, since the original 2010 permission included a condition to restrict the hours of noisy activities, and this permission would marginally extend the curtilage, the report recommends that this condition is imposed again. In terms of ecology, the site is within proximity of the Tower Corridor site of importance for nature conservation. An ecological survey has been submitted, but the Council's ecologist and NRW have no objections to the proposal. So in conclusion, and having regard to all the material planning consideration, the report considers the proposed development is acceptable and the recommendation is to approve subject to condition. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Ivan. Any members in comments wish to speak? Anyone? No? Oh, pass it down.
More than likely I've missed the bit about the demolition side of it with regards to the asbestos. So if it is in there, I apologise. If it's not, why not?
Yes, it is in there. I deliberately mentioned in my presentation that the building does include asbestos, and that is one of the reasons why the building is being demolished. Asbestos is a hazardous substance, as you were aware, and that will have to be taken to a registered licence area. But that is one of the reasons why the building is not fit for purpose and needs to be demolished.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Aaron. Can you confirm if there's a designated area for the depollution cars to be kept, and rather than I think the scrapyard, where they're obviously banked up on top of each other? Is there a designated area for those cars to be put on site? Would you know?
My understanding is it already got, the bulk of the site has already got permission to use as a waste transfer site in 2010. I'm not aware that there are any restrictions on the planning permission in that respect, but it's quite possible because there is a separate licensing requirement from NRW on it. They have their own quite strict requirements. Some of those conditions are covered by this application to deal with noise, for example. But as I mentioned in the presentation, there is matters to deal with drainage, such as, you know, your your petrol discharges or oil discharges, and they will be kept in a sealed tank to be taken out. So there are processes in there to deal with pollution, together with the recommended conditions from pollution control and NRW. But as I said, the site does benefit, the bulk of the site benefits from an already existing planning permission as a waste transfer site, and it also requires an NRW license to carry out that activity as well.
Yeah, can I just ask about the flooding? Because obviously you've got condition 4, commencing a flooding management and evacuation plan. Now, clearly, as the officer said before, this is fine within the old TAN 15. I'm not sure whether the new TAN 15 says there's a greater flood risk. But in terms of putting together a plan in terms of dealing with flooding, do they have to take into account the updated TAN 15 as part of that? Because, you know, obviously, if you're doing to an outdated flood risk management, whatever it is, the Welsh Government produces advice note, then it may not be sufficient.
My honest answer is, in view of the recentness of the new TAN 15, I haven't got into the depth of the detail of TAN 15. How that condition is to be discharged, we will just have to wait and see how that application comes forward. And we can take advice from our colleagues in NRW if required. We can also consult the new TAN 15 to see what's applicable or not. But as my colleague mentioned before, we are making this decision based on the current TAN 15, and that condition is in line with. Sorry, we're making this decision based on the TAN 15 that was applicable at the time the application was received, and this condition is aligned with that requirement.
It's feasible that when you come to evaluate that plan, that you might say, well, we need to be slightly more rigorous because the new TAN 15 says it's a greater risk.
It's possible. I just can't. I can't rule it in or out at this stage until we as officers have spent a bit more time to look at it.
Yeah, fair enough.
But the condition is there for you to be aware of, and the standard that we are hoping for if in the event that approval is granted.
Councillor Jeffrey.
Chair, following on from Councillor Black, I've cycled on that path many times in the past, and I note that the scheduled area where this is to be built, it appears to be lower than the actual river itself. And I was just wondering, has that, I would assume that would have been taken into consideration, but I can't find any reference of that in the documentation. I wonder, has that been a consideration? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Well, NRW are our technical advisors on flooding matters. They will have access to maps of the area. They will understand what are the flood risks posed to that area, and their response to us is that they raise no objection on flooding matters. So the land levels is a key factor when you're considering flood matters, because you need to know at what level things flood. On the basis of the information that we've received from NRW on flooding matters, and based on the photographs that I've put forward that you can see, we believe that it is acceptable in flood risk terms in that context. But bearing in mind, obviously, the site already does benefit from the waste transfer site at the moment. The area of extended curtilage that we were talking about here in this particular case, when you look at the red line boundary of the site, is the area where the new building is going. The new building is further away to the river. So you've got the river here, you've got the yard, you've got the big building that is being demolished. And then further away again, you've got that smaller building that's proposed. So we've got to look at that in context to what is already granted for the site, I suppose. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's just a query really. In the recommendations, we've got the hours of work currently for the business. But when you look at the informatives for taking away the construction noise, they obviously differ quite markedly. And I just wondered, because it's a really noisy site, why are we making the hours shorter from 8 o'clock in the morning when they can start, I think it was at 6:30, to actually on site for their own work? Because I think construction noise would have been quieter maybe than the actual noise of the building.
That's a good point, councillor. I guess the construction noise informative that has been added will be something that is covered by our pollution control department when we look at statutory noise issues. Condition 11 is meant to deal with beyond the post-construction phase, the actual operations that the waste transfer site would be actually conducting from a day-to-day basis. Those are the times that's been specified on the 2010 permission. And as I mentioned to you, because there is a slight increase in the curtilage of it, it would be odd to have a different time constraint on a smaller part of the site when the wider site can operate on different times. So this condition is meant to make sure that the site as a whole operates under the same time frame. And in view of the large part of the site already benefits from that condition, the same times have been specified. But I take your point, the construction times is slightly different to the operational, but we have to acknowledge that construction is generally more on a short-term basis, where the longer-term operations will be secured by condition 11.
I just wondered why they were doing the construction noise less when I would have thought they could use the same hours as the actual workings of the site. So they obviously got a reason for it.
I can only comment that these are the comments that we've received from the pollution control department, and the condition 11 is just trying to be consistent with how we have approached the original scheme for the waste transfer site in 2010.
Okay, thank you very much, Alan. No one else wishes to speak? Okay, thank you. Thank you for your report and all those questions answered, Alan. The recommendation there is one of approval, so we will take a vote on that now then, please.
Yeah, Councillor Myers-Baker. Peter Black.
For.
Phil Downing.
For.
Alan Jeffrey.
For.
Mary Jones.
For.
Mike Lewis.
For.
Richard Lewis. Mark Tribe.
For.
Mike White.
For.
Andrew Williams.
For.
And Paul Lloyd.
For.
That's 11 for unanimous.
It's unanimous. Thank you very much. And then we move on to agenda item 6, which you find on page 29, and that's with you, David. It's all for school.
Thank you, Chair. Afternoon, members. First item reports is offer school modification of the existing 106 agreement. So this planning permission and subsequent 106 agreement from 2022 relates to residential development for 101 units, and development is on site as currently referred to as the Willows. So essentially, this seeks to modify the 106 agreement with regard to the second schedule to amend the trigger points for the payment of the education contribution. So in particular, is to pay the first tranches in 2 tranches, the first tranche on the occupation of 51 dwellings as opposed to 30 currently, and to pay the second tranche on occupation of 85 dwellings as opposed to 75 dwellings currently. So the justification made by the applicant to amend these trigger points is essentially it's because they've delivered quite a high number of affordable homes in the first build and the first phase of the programme in conjunction with POBL, which has impacted on the financial viability of the development and also the additional costs which the project has undertaken because of unforeseen contamination across the site. As I say, this has added to the pressure of the viability on the site. So consultations in the report, we've education department haven't got a big problem with changing the trigger points for the development in terms of using the subsequent education contribution. Likewise, strategic planning policy in the report outlines the development plan policy, the context of these policies, and essentially what it concludes is that the LPA is permissible to demonstrate flexibility, pragmatism, and realism when considering financial viability constraints. So, as I say, there's in 106, there's two contributions. Firstly is the affordable housing, so that's 35 dwellings across the site, so that's unaffected by this modification, and the education contribution. So the sum of the contribution, which is 844,000, is not affected by the development. So it's only the trigger points which we are looking to amend as part of this application. So considering such application, case law has established that the main issues the council needs to ask itself is, does the existing planning obligation still serve a useful planning purpose? If it does and modification is proposed, then the question is whether that planning purpose could equally served by the proposed modification. If it would, then the council should agree the modification. If it doesn't, then the council should refuse the application. And in the answer to all those questions, the answer is yes. The existing planning obligation still serves a useful planning purpose. The planning purpose could equally serve by the proposed modification to change the trigger points. So therefore, it is recommended that the council should agree the modification as requested. Thank you, Chair.
Very much, David. Oh, Councillor Jones, thank you.
It's a general point, actually. It's not just pertinent to Alpha. We agree these 106s, and then lo and behold, they come back and they're always asking for adjustments. It is not the council's fault that they decided to do the phase with Pobble. They have built them, they're there, I've seen them. Very nice, I have to, I wouldn't mind one myself, but that's not the point. The point is, those points were put in when we approved the plans for this development. That is up to the construction and the builder to actually meet those requirements. I understand obviously what's being said, and it's left us obviously in a very difficult position, and we all know at the moment things are difficult, especially with building materials and things. But the point is made, we approve 106 agreements, we approve the actual spacing out of them, and yet this is not the first one to come back, and I'm sure it's not going to be the last. We are not being unreasonable when we look at them, but I don't know a way around it, but I am not very happy, as you can tell.
Thank you for that. Councillor White and then Councillor Downing.
Yes, Chair, exactly the same point to say. We make these arrangements when the application comes in front of us. We would have thought that a big building company like this would have obviously done a research and what they want to do is the site and anything they would identify. So that would probably have all been linked into how many properties they would get on the development. But as Councillor Jones says, the issue is that we like now as the committee have more or less have got a gun to our heads. And if we don't sort of go along the recommendations, it could be that perhaps there'd be less houses there, wherever. But that is obviously at the detriment now of the school and the children. But as I say, it's the same old chestnut that keeps coming back to us. But as I said, we are obviously been having a round side, but I'm hoping that perhaps now with the new way forward with the LDP2, plus we can perhaps put something there that will nail it down firmly that this is what we expect as a planning authority, that if agreements are made at the initial stage of the planning applications, those are kept. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, well, I agree with both speakers up to a point. If a developer comes in, and I don't know if this is the same, they got X amount of social housing and they put the social housing up front, then I can't blame them for coming back to put the trigger point out because they're not making as much money as they could have made, and that's fair enough. The gamble we've got is we put these trigger points in due to negotiations with the developer. So I understand that bit about it. The problem you've got is when they put the top trigger point of 81, then what happens if the 81 is not reached? I know that that's for every site, but I do sympathise with if they're putting the affordable housing up front, then yes, they would come back. I'm not happy when they do come back to adjust 106s, but this is one time where I would support it.
Thank you, Chair. There's only one point to pick up. Every time somebody comes and asks for us a reduction in the 106, it's not every time, but nearly every time, there's always this sentence, and it's in here again. We have incurred significant additional costs to the project in dealing with unforeseen contamination encountered in the site. How do we substantiate that that is the case? It's very easy to say, it's very, but do officers check up on it? Is there a system where we can ensure that this is the case and it's just not a stroke of the pen to try and delay the payment of our 106? Thank you.
No one else wish to speak? Oh, no, sorry for.
They haven't asked for a reduction, have they, or the 106? So the money's the same. Yeah, okay.
As David said, you know, the request meets all those 3 conditions, so we are where we are with it. Okay, I got no one else wish to speak. Okay, so is there anything you wanted to respond to there, David?
Yeah, well, just to clarify, the contribution is unchanged. It is subject to indexation, so it'll probably be higher than the 144,000. Yeah, so what I would say is I think we've taken their justification in terms of contamination at face value. We could have gone into asking for a cost analysis, but we haven't done that on this occasion, to be honest. I think we've just accepted the development. Yes, they have contributed a larger percentage of affordable housings up front, which basically they've delivered at a loss effectively. And I think I'm right in saying as well that the sale of the private houses has been slightly slow, which has affected profitability and yes, the second tranche as well, 85 dwellings. The permission is 101 dwellings, so obviously what we are saying is that they can't build the development out until they've paid the second tranche anyway, so that's covered by that point anyway. I don't think education have advanced the detailed design of the 2 contributions for Olgfa School itself or for Parklands Primary, so I don't think that's going to affect the long-term use of this contribution. And as I say, I think having regard to those tests, I think that just changing the trigger point, I understand what members' point of view is, but ultimately the development is well advanced. And I've got every confidence that the development will be completed and we will receive those contributions. So,
yeah, what David just said is quite correct. It's the same on the student village, actually. The difficulty we've got is that I can only speak for Olgfa. I sort of know about Parklands. The schools are full, you know, and I know with Olgfa we've just been told that we're going to have a larger STF. Yet we haven't got room to put it, you know, because the money follows, not goes before. And this is the problem with these 106s linked to education. They can't even put a planning application in until the money is lodged with the authority. So we have to wait for the whole process. And I'm sorry, it is slow. I obviously know about Henry Island more because we're waiting for the detailed planning application to come before us. So, you know, we're always playing sort of chicken and egg type of scenario, and education will not do anything until the money is actually in the bank, so to speak. So we're holding up these developments within the schools. The children is having an impact on because they're squashed in together into different spaces that they've used for, you know, breakout rooms or whatever. So I don't know how we're going to, it's not just about these schools, it's right across the county. I don't know how we can get around it. And when Councillor White said about the LDP, I don't know if we can actually put something in there to safeguard this, because we know with Gowerton School we had the same problem. We've got lots and lots of sites, the money doesn't come, it takes ages to get planned. And I'm not having a go at planners here, please don't think that it's the surveyors and the everybody else's that have to come and do everything. What is the answer? That's what I'm trying to make the point.
Yeah, I just wanted to come back to the officer in response to my question earlier. Can you ensure that the contamination question is looked at properly? No, I'm not being facetious here, but looked at properly next time rather than just taking it as a given, because time and time again we get this written in, and it seems to most of the committee that it's just something that's written in to get a change to the 106, and it is a bone of contention with the committee that companies keep coming back to us and trying to renege on the original 106, irrespective if it's for less money or for more time. But could that be looked at in the future, Chair? That's all I'm asking.
Chairman, I think it's quite right that we get, if the money comes in for whatever it is, I think that if you didn't make sure we had the money in the bank first, whether you would get it once they built. And I think you go into a shop today, you've got to pay over the counter before you go out. Otherwise, you just couldn't afford it. I think it's far better. We've got the money. Once the money's there, then you've got something to do. I mean, I would cry if I had a lot of money tucked away in the bank there and I didn't know what to do with it. I mean, or people would
We're talking about the planning application.
Yeah, but
someone building it.
yeah, but the question comes back: what happens if, say, a builder says, "Right, I'm going to build 50 houses," and he's agreed a point there. But what if he doesn't build the 50? What if he only builds 25? And then at a later date, he may come back for the other 25. I mean, it's and today, in fairness, the market in housing is not good, and the private sector is going to. We're in a recession, and you speak to any estate agent, the sales have dropped dramatically, and I think what we are facing. I mean. We are facing a tremendous amount of problems we've got building up. And then when you think of what the government is paying out to put people into hotels, I think it's crazy. I don't know where we're going, Thank you, Jeff.
No, thank you. No one else wishes to speak, no? Anything to respond to that? No, okay. Well, if you look at page 33, you can see the recommendation on there. That consent is granted for the modification of the section 106. So we can take a vote on that recommendation, and please, Gareth.
Yeah, Mike Baker. Peter Black.
For.
Phil Downing.
For.
Alan Jeffrey.
For.
Mary Jones.
For.
Mike Lewis.
For.
Richard Lewis.
For.
Mark Fay.
For.
Mike White.
For.
Andrew Williams.
For.
Paul.
And for.
Again, it's Larry for.
That's unanimous. Thank you very much. And then the over to item 7 now. You'll find that on page 34, and that's the Old Way Centre. Yours again, Dave. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Again, modification of the 106. So this relates to the Old Way Centre, which obviously members probably aware has been converted to a student development back in 2016. It was for, I think it was 556 students, I think. So this essentially relates to modification to the 106 to amend the second schedule, which is the restriction upon residential occupation, and in particular removing this restriction of keeping a motorised vehicle within 1 mile radius to allow some car parking on site. So essentially, some background here, Alexander House and Old Way are owned by the same family, same company. So at the time of the original application, there was a larger demand for office car parking. Over the last 9 years, the office market has substantially changed and demand is reduced. And I'm quite sure that I'm accurate in saying Alexander House isn't full at this stage. In fact, I think it's predominantly vacant. So the ownership structure has allowed this amendment, therefore. So basically, it's to allow the existing or some of the existing basement, in particular 40 spaces of the basement car park, which I think there's about 100 spaces there at the minute. So when I visited there, it was basically empty. So essentially, is to use some of the existing parking, which was office allocated, is now to reallocate 40 spaces to the student block effectively. Justification obviously is because the car parking has become available. The applicant is also citing safety reasons at the minute. I think some of the students use the City Road car park, the church up the road, Divati, and obviously they're citing antisocial behaviour, safety issues, walking back at night, etc. So consultations, no objections from our legal or highways department. Obviously, this was a when it was granted in 2016, it was basically a car-free development for students. There were 20 spaces allocated at that time, essentially for disabled parking and for the management of the premises themselves. So obviously, this is 40 spaces specifically for students to park. So in the 106, there were two essential contributions: the highway contribution, £96,000 just over. So that's been paid, and that went to the works, the segregated cycleway public realm works, which happened on Alter Street a number of years ago. And this amendment relates to the second schedule. So as it currently stands, as I say, the 106 requires each student to enter into a tenancy agreement in respect of each accommodation. They have to be a registered student. As it currently stands, they're not allowed to keep a car within a 1 mile radius unless it's within a public car parking facility such as High Street. So essentially some case law has established that since that 106 was completed in 2016, essentially put in restrictions on land which the applicant doesn't control, i.e. such as the public highway or third-party land, we can't enforce against. So this means that the 1 mile restriction is basically unenforceable, and as this is applied to other student developments within the city as well, as which we're aware. So in terms of this modification, again, the three sort of or four questions that we need to ask ourselves: does the existing permission or obligation still serve a useful planning purpose? If it does, modification is proposed, then is the question that the plan purpose should equally be served by the proposed modification. And if it would, then the council should agree. If it doesn't, then the council should refuse. So again, the answer to those three questions is yes. The existing plan application still serves the useful planning purpose. The plan purpose could equally be served by the proposed modification, and therefore we should agree the modification. So therefore, it's recommended that we remove the existing restriction of keeping a motorised vehicle within 1 mile radius, which will allow the use of the basement car park for 40 spaces. So the tenancy agreement will need to be amended accordingly. So there will be 40 spaces allocated to 40 students. Obviously, the rest of the students won't have access to those spaces, unless, obviously, as I say in the report, it's when they on unloading day, where there's a management plan so that they bring the car onto site, and then the car is normally by their parents. They have to go and park elsewhere effectively. So yeah, so essentially that's it. So the recommendation is to modify the 106 to allow the use or some use of the car parking spaces in the existing basement. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, David. Councillor Black.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Obviously, I accept that the appeal court ruling makes this this provision to be unworkable, and we obviously has to go. But I would note two things. First of all, that according to paragraph 4.5, some students are actually doing what they shouldn't do under the existing section 106 agreement, which is parking within a 1 mile radius anyway. And secondly, that we've been through a whole succession of student accommodation planning applications in which nearly every instance we've questioned, are there enough parking spaces there? And we've been told, well, don't worry, students don't have cars, it's fine. And now it seems they do have cars after all. So, clearly we feel, I feel completely disillusioned by this whole thing.
Councillor White.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm sure David knows my views on this. We've had a couple of run-ins on this with the students' accommodation down at the lower end of my ward. And as he said, because of case law now, this is it, But it is very frustrating. Councillor Black has said, students have got cars, we know that. But it doesn't help as well when you've got student accommodation, which abuts an housing development as well. That's when you sort of adds coal to the fire. as the saying goes. But I say, you know, at the end, and they were sort of did sort of look at the views of residents as well themselves. I'm sure we wouldn't have had issues. But as you say, you know, this sort of condition, as I said before, was not worth the paper it's written on, unfortunately.
I find it really odd that we're discussing putting more parking places in than most times when we're having a meeting. We're discussing the lack of parking spaces with the development. So I think 40 places that will take cars off the public highway is a really good idea. Thank you.
Yeah, just to come back on a couple of things. The students who use the city car park, they're not actually, whilst it's within a mile radius, they're not actually in breach, because the existing restriction is unless it's in a public parking facility. So arguably, yeah, I mean, if you take the word in, you could argue, not anyway, not being slightly pedantic maybe, but just to reiterate, yeah, I mean, normally these student developments are promoted on being car-free developments, and that's the way they predominantly operate across the city, to be honest. This is slightly unusual because it's referring to an existing basement, so those car parking spaces already exist, obviously. So it's diverting or reallocating parking from one use to another use, if you like. So it's not generating additional parking or traffic, if you like. It's just using what's already there effectively. So
I think, Chair, that's accepted, but of course there are developments which don't have that facility, so that is going to be a problem.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering, the appetite for student accommodation, I believe, was diminishing due to the drop in student numbers. Yet we're increasing the capacity for students. I have a query about that, you know, especially amongst the foreign contingent.
sorry, yeah. So this isn't increasing the number of students. That stays the same. This is only relates to parking spaces. But in terms of your general point, yeah, I think the demand for student accommodation across the city has diminished, I think, in recent years, because I think the overseas market is diminished quite considerably. So these type of facilities, where they were once, when they were built or converted in 2016, there were a lot of overseas students, I believe, but I think they're predominantly occupied by domestic students now, to be honest, British students.
Other hands up? Sure. Okay, thank you, David. Well, you can see again, we're on to page 37. The recommendation is that consent is granted for the modification of the section 106 agreement. So we could take a vote on that now then, please, Gav.
Yeah, Councillor Mybaker,
For.
Peter Black,
For.
Phil Downing,
For.
Alan Jeffrey,
For.
Mary Jones,
For.
Mike Lewis,
For.
Richard Lewis, Mark Tribe,
For.
Mike White,
For.
Andrew Williams, Paul Lloyd. Again, 11 for, that's unanimous.
That's carried again. Thank you very much. And that, thank you very much, concludes our business for today. And our next meeting is 15th of May. 13th of May, sorry.